yeah, so I started going to these events, and the issue that I was having is, like when I walked in these places, I didn't know anyone, but everyone seemed like they were already talking. Like they already knew each other. Like they all came with someone or they all knew someone or whatever. And I would approach people and I'd know pretty quickly, like, okay, this isn't someone that wants to talk to me, someone that's like, whatever. And I would just feel really alone, like going from event to event, trying my best to pitch my heart out who I am. And I just always felt like I was doing it wrong, And eventually I run into this guy at this event and we're talking. He tells me how he goes to Harvard, all these things. He's around my age. And it was like a Gen Z networking event. We're like, all right, what are you going to the next thing? I said, oh, me and my friends going to this next event. It's like, all right, cool. We're going to go. So we all go together. And this group really ended up changing my life. One of the kids, no idea, like 2 months later, ended up like getting backed by Visa, raising like $3 million to reinvent the credit card, all these things. Another of the kids, a year later, I ended up living with him at Harvard inside like our iLabs program. I was taking computer science classes there, whatever. And another of the guys, like I do events with now. So it came together full circle. But we're going to these events and I run into this dude named Isaiah and we really vibe together. And now the group is just growing and growing as we're going to these tech events. And he's like, oh, after this, you got to come to the penthouse. It's like, oh yeah, like let's go to the penthouse, whatever. And he's like, first you got to go to the tech salsa event. I'm like, all right, cool. So I go to the salsa event and I'm salsaing and he's not even there. So I'm there for like an hour just sweating, like, I don't know, he's not even there. So I was like, oh, I'm at the penthouse. I'm like, why didn't you just tell me to go to the penthouse? He's like, oh, it's on the way. Whatever, right? So I go to the penthouse. I'm like, how am I going to get in? I'm like, I'm just going to tell him I'm Isaiah. So I just tell him I'm Isaiah. They're like, right this way. So I get to this penthouse. So he just snuck me into this penthouse party. We're at this tech event. And they're all like, you got to come on the yacht. I'm like, what yacht? It's at the yacht party tomorrow. I'm like, what yacht party? Right? So the next day we go to this yacht party. And I managed to sneak into this yacht party by telling them I bought a ticket. I just don't have my cash app on my phone. So they're like, oh, we'll just let you in. And that was the Tavern yacht party. And I didn't know any of these people. So I didn't know any of these people. I didn't know anything about anything, right? I'm just meeting people, coming to the city, whatever. And that guy, Isaiah, ended up being my best friend. And going to these events, trying to like meet people, build these connections. When Tech Week ended, I had nothing to do. And I tried this thing called 222, which is this app, which you pay $30 to get set up on like a dinner with 6 other strangers. And afterwards, you guys made it over comedy club, whatever. This is very popular now, right? And I do it. I'm like, man, that was fun, but I can't do this every week. Like, I'm gonna run out of money. Like, right? Like, I'm like trying to budget, whatever. And at first, I thought about doing something in real estate tech because I come from a real estate family. But eventually, I just started thinking about like how I can make friends, how I can meet people. And I started designing something around that. First, it was a hardware. Like, oh, what if people could like tap your shirt and get your information and the AI like sends follow-ups to each other? Like, you're going to remember that guy who said, oh, tap my shirt. You know what I mean? Rather than get my LinkedIn or whatever. And I realized the value wasn't in the hardware. It was in the software of how people end up meeting and getting hooked and addicted to being out in real life. The same way I was addicted to going to these networking events after Tech Week. And it's just slowly over time, like grew into the concept of ArkSphere, the first in-person social media, getting people hooked to real life, the speed that, gets you to stop scrolling.
First place in the New York City Impact Cohort Demo Day is Jackson Greene of ArkSphere. Woo! Yeah! Joe's ready to walk out. He has his backpack on, but the world wants to hear from him. Jackson said,
I didn't think I'd win. Thank you all. Download Ark by ArkSphere on the App Store. And if you're cool, you can walk up to me after you get your games.
Thank you, thank you, Jackson. Thank you for everyone. Go out there and network.
Welcome to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. I'm Nik Michael. In this episode, I sit down with someone who has lived through a moment, a decision, a rupture, a quiet internal shift that changed the entire direction of their life. We look underneath the resume, underneath the pitch deck, underneath the highlight reel to find the human moment that made all of it possible. My guest today is Jackson Greene, founder of Ark, also known as ArkSphere, a platform reimagining how people connect before they ever walk into a room together. In just 30 days, Ark grew to 35,000 members. Jackson won the pitch at Propel Earth's New York City Impact Demo Night. He taught himself to code. He's raising $1.5 million. On paper, this looks like a fast-moving founder story. But underneath that story is a young man who left home with no home to go to, who was recovering from an accident that shook his sense of his own manhood, who nearly lost his best friend to suicide, and who built a fashion line for psychiatric patients before he ever built an app. Jackson's pivot point wasn't a strategy meeting, it was survival, and then it was purpose. What draws me to this conversation isn't just the entrepreneurship story, though that's compelling on its own. It's what sits underneath it, the awareness cycle that had to complete before action was even possible. Contact before change, feeling it before thinking it, before doing anything about it. Today, we're going to trace that arc together. From Georgia to New York City, from crisis to community, from a young man who didn't feel ready to a founder building the very thing he once needed himself. We'll talk about early adversity and what it teaches a person about self-reliance. We'll talk about the leap to New York, not as a career move, but as an identity move. And we'll talk about what it means to build a company as a young founder when the world is still deciding whether to take you seriously. Jackson, welcome to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. I'm very excited, as you know, to have this conversation with you.
Wow, I never heard someone describe me like that. That was like out of the movies.
Well, look, what strikes me about your story is the speed of it, everything about it, and you in particular. But what I want to start off with, really, is what was Jackson like growing up? And tell us a little bit about your story.
Growing up, I was an artist all my life since I was a little kid. I used to draw all day long. My mom would go to Goodwill and grab these VHS tapes back when everyone would use VHS. And she would put on like the 90s Spider-Man, my cartoons. And I remember just staying up all night and watching them and drawing Spider-Man every day and her putting on Michael Jackson. And it was like the only entertainer that I really felt like, oh, I looked like, he had my name. So every day I would practice and I'd learn all his moves. I had like his clothes. I was always just like a really creative young kid, just always making stories, art, dancing. Yeah, I was an interesting kid.
That is so awesome to hear. I love hearing about people's, if you want to say, origin story. So growing up, it must have been a very different experience for you. And that creativity you carry with you. So you continued on with that. So adversity, you've been through a significant amount. Here on Pivot Point, we like to talk about that moment of awareness. It might have been emotional, it might have been a cognitive or physical one. What was it for you that you want to share with listeners?
The adversity I've been through. Do you mean in my like younger years or my adult life?
At any point that you'd like to share, if it had an impact on you and the direction you came to form Ark or whatever strikes you most.
I think that a big adversity I faced was my car accident. So I've been running my fashion company for a couple years or so at that point, and I was sitting at a red light, and then this much larger truck came. I was in a Prius and smashed the back of me, and it folded the car in half. And at that point, I can't remember how many concussions I've had at that point, maybe 7. So that was a big moment in my life because I hadn't realized that I lost a lot of my memory. So I wasn't able to, without even realizing it, I really wasn't fully able. Like I wasn't able to run my business the way I used to. I didn't remember a lot of like people in my life. I remember this was a moment when I was like, I didn't realize how bad it was. I had an ex-girlfriend call me and she was upset with me about something. And I didn't even know who she was. I had barely even remembered her. And that was a big wake-up call because I had to sit down with my mom and be like, this woman called me. She said, and she was just like, you don't remember? Like, and so having to go through physical therapy, having to, like rebuild a lot of my mental again, that was a very difficult time doing that while trying to run a business.
I can't imagine all this that you went through and how it shook you up. A lot of people who go through hardship early, either they armor up or open up. Which one did you do first, and how did that change over time?
I think I armored up. Yeah, they got armored up because up until that point, I was also an MMA fighter. So I trained MMA for 5 or so years, and I was preparing to start actually competing. So I got in my accident, I couldn't fight anymore. But I was still, had that resilience of being a fighter. You don't really talk about things like that. I didn't feel like I was in an environment to really that facilitate those type of conversations. So I think I definitely internalized it. So it took me a long time to really make sense of how it affected me.
And how many years ago are we talking about here?
Maybe like 2 years.
Okay, so it essentially wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
What did you have to, from that period of your life, you had to probably actively learn and unlearn certain things to continue going. What was that for you?
Good question. Well, I had to learn how to identify a problem, like when you're given an issue, you have to break it down in order to compartmentalize it and execute on achieving it, like execute on it going away, right? But when you have a problem, like your body doesn't work the way it used to, your mind is cloudy, and you don't have like the energy you used to, nothing feels right. Like everything feels wrong. You can't think clearly. You can't move clearly. I had to learn to stop pushing myself as hard as I used to, because I would crash. Like I couldn't work out the way I used to. I used to work out like twice a day. I used to fight every day. I literally couldn't fight. I couldn't lift weights. I had lost 10 pounds of muscle. I had to learn that was not like a bad thing, that I had to be willing to let go of some things I had in order to go to the next phase of my life. I had to learn to take things as a lesson. Yeah, that was the biggest thing I had to unlearn. I had to unlearn my routine and how hard I would push myself, and relearn how to approach solving a problem now that my mind and body weren't able to work the way they used to.
So that I just love the way you put that. And I like the way you phrased it, and you took your time and took a moment to really describe it, because I could only imagine how what you were accustomed to as being involved in MMA. My background is in Taekwondo. So to push yourself, and I used to do tournaments, competitions all the time, you have to ignore a lot of pain or a lot of discomfort, and you have to push yourself a lot. It sounds like you really needed to make those adjustments. How was it for you to make those adjustments?
It was hard.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the essence of who you are, and I think that's what contributes honestly to your success now.
Yeah, it was hard making those adjustments, but it was one of those. There's this show I used to watch, well, I still watch, it's called Naruto, and I absolutely love it. And there's this character who the characters like get his name's Sasuke, gets these powers from his eyes, right? And the only way for his like power to awaken is he has to go through so much trauma that it awakens. So all of his life he's training to defeat his brother. And as he comes to find out that the only way for his eyes to get to a certain level is he has to suffer. And it's everything else completely out of his control. He just has to suffer. And it's not until he loses his brother that they get the way that they need to be. And I really resonated with that story of, as a founder and even just as a young man, we try to like take so much control of our lives to get the results that we need. Because there's a lot of pressure to be a young man, to be a man at all. And as you know, as father, as someone that's starting their own business, as someone who's worked for many years to make yourself a man, the biggest requirement it took you to get there is you had to be willing to suffer. There was no shortcuts. So I think that was definitely something like there was nothing I could have done to make that time better. I just had to be willing to get there.
Yes, I like the way you put that. And what you're referring to also is embracing what was happening for you, not withdraw or reject it or act out against it, but acknowledge. And the best way to put it is to accept it. Because if you stay in denial, if you stay in anger or get depressed over it or start bargaining those stages of loss and death and dying, that whole why me, why did this happen? This is terrible for me. Woe is me. You can't get to that acceptance stage. So that's a true piece that's hard for many to embrace at a young age. Yet you were able to do that. So when you look back at that younger version of yourself, what did he believe he needed to survive that maybe wasn't true anymore? What did he believe he needed to survive that maybe wasn't true anymore?
What do you mean? Could you rephrase the question?
Yeah. When you look back at your younger self, what did your younger self believe he needed to do to survive that maybe isn't true anymore?
Okay.
Take a moment.
Well, I think that when I think of the younger version of me who was going through all that, I had friends to call, and I had people I may have been dating or family or whatever. And, you know, when you go through something, you want to talk to people about it. You want to express it. You want to lean on your community. And I really thought that I needed that. So, like, I may have been willing to compromise some things within myself, or things I knew were right or whatever, so that I didn't have to be alone to go through some of these things. But that's not true anymore. I actually love my me time. And no one that I had been friends with in Georgia or was really close to there, I have no contact with any of them anymore when I came to New York. And that was very hard for me. And now I see that I had to let it go. Like I couldn't have grown unless I shed my skin almost. So
Right.
being able to learn to be like an adult and not have that like emotional attachment to people being in your life, I think that's something that I don't think I felt at, 19, 18 years old.
I've heard you say that you had to let go of your family and your resentment in order to move forward. Are those two things connected for you, or were they separate battles?
I think that those were connected. There was a point even when I came to like when I was going through my recovery, I realized I was like, man, I need to move out the house. Like I need to go. And I had no idea how I was going to go. And every option that seemed to move out the house seemed like I had to receive or accept help through family. And when I ended up moving to New York and I, started having whatever, there was a point where I decided I didn't want to be in contact with my family. And me going through that and me having to be like more responsible for myself, it was real character development for me and learning how to be an adult. And by the time I was in contact with my family again, I was able to have a much stronger relationship with them because I was a man now, and I was able to accept and make sense of how it affected me, whatever, like me no longer being a child. And I was able to appreciate things I wasn't able to see before. So I think that's just a part of growing up though.
Yeah, no, well said. I'm excited to ask this and to hear really your response. That awareness that you had, was it an emotional one? Was it a thought? Was it cognitive to make that move? Like when did you have that awareness that it's time to make a move? Because something was pushing you or compelling you.
I don't entirely remember.
Even before you actually did it. See, the turning point usually occurs sometimes long before. You've decided it, and then your mind starts planning it.
Do you mean when I decided it's time to leave home, like move to New York?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like that was a major turning point for you.
I had a moment where I don't want to speak on it too in depth, but I remember I had shared something with a relative that had happened to me, and I really was hoping they'd be more empathetic towards that. And I realized that I really wasn't in where I belonged. I needed to go. And when I came here just visiting New York, I had this very, very deep sequence of experiences. Before I came here, I had spoken for Berkshire Hathaway. So there's this company, this nonprofit called Summit Counseling, and they were doing an event to help raise money for kids in recovery, like suicide, mental health, whatever. And they wanted a youth, ambassador to speak on the program. So I do it, whatever. It's in front of all these people. It's this whole gala, and I do it in this church. I come to find out before me, there was a man that was supposed to be a speaker, and he passed away. So at the end of the event, this one walks up to me and she grabs my face. She's like, "My husband would have loved you." And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, why is this lady touching me?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I come to find out that she's like, "I want you to be my family. I want you to be my son. I want you to come to our church." I come to find out after going to the church that was her husband who was supposed to speak, and I was speaking in his place. So I start going to their church. I'm not Christian or anything up to this point, and I'm going like every Sunday. And when my mom told me that she wanted me to come to New York to visit my sister, we come up here, and I really didn't want to go, but I felt like it'd be good for me to start traveling now that I was mostly recovered. And I remember I didn't want to break this habit I had of going to church every Sunday, even though I wasn't even Christian up to this point. So right behind the hotel is this spot called the Brooklyn Tabernacle, which I discovered is like the #1 choir in the country. It's like gorgeous church. And I go in there, and it's thousands of not thousands, maybe like a couple thousand people all in this like relatively cramped environment. And, for that many people. And I remember the pastor asked everyone to come to the altar who needed someone to pray for them. I just saw hundreds of people come to this altar and they're sobbing, like adults, grown men, like sobbing. There's this music playing and whatever. And I remember like closing my eyes and reaching my hand out and feeling like someone like hold my hand and speak to me. And when I opened my eyes, no one was there, but I heard them. And I never experienced something like that. And I took it as a sign. What they told me was to kill the boy and not be afraid, like to just have faith. So when I went back to the hotel, I made a pact with myself and God. And I told him I would take it as a sign. And I had hair this long at that point. I told I would shave off all my hair. Tomorrow I would officially move to New York City and I was going to make a new life for myself. So I did that. I cut off all my hair. I didn't have somewhere to stay at that point. I slept at someone's floor and I get a call from a friendish back at home. And he told me he wasn't going to be able to come to New York for Tech Week. I was like, what's Tech Week? And he was like, you're telling me you just moved to New York the first day of New York Tech Week? You didn't even know? I said, no. So he sends me this event. I go and I don't have a great time. And I'm just walking around. I see balloons outside of this door. And I walk in, I'm like, what is this? They're like, oh, this is Robin Hood Ventures. It's a tech event for founders with no tech experience. And I'm like, oh, like, what's that? And they send me this list. I'm like, what's this list? Like, oh, it's a list of all the Tech Week events. So I go, and it just opened my mind to a whole new world. I knew nothing about, like software. I knew nothing about venture capital. I knew nothing about anything, right? Like, I was like almost hooked. Like, so I started trying to go to all these events to meet people, whatever. And I had a really hard time. Like, I didn't know anyone. Everyone used LinkedIn. I had no LinkedIn. We used Instagram or your number in the South. And just like going through that experience was just a big shift for me. I'm sorry. I think I forgot your question.
No, you're right on target. This is it. I'm just struck by the whole progression. And I know you weren't thinking about saying any of this, but this is where we're going. And this is where I want to continue. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I started going to these events, and the issue that I was having is, like when I walk in these places, I didn't know anyone, but everyone seemed like they were already talking. Like they already knew each other. Like they all came with someone or they all knew someone or whatever. And I would approach people and I'd know pretty quickly, like, okay, this isn't someone that wants to talk to me, someone that's like, whatever. And I would just feel really alone, like going from event to event, trying my best to pitch my heart out who I am. And I just always felt like I was doing it wrong, And eventually I run into this guy at this event and we're talking. He tells me how to go to Harvard, all these things. He's around my age. And it was like a Gen Z networking event. We're like, all right, what are you going to the next thing? I said, oh, me and my friends are going to this next event. It's like, all right, cool. We're going to go. So we all go together. And this group really ended up changing my life. One of the kids, no idea, like 2 months later, ended up like getting backed by Visa, raising like $3 million to reinvent the credit card, all these things. Another of the kids, a year later, I ended up living with him at Harvard inside like our ILAS program. I was taking computer science classes there, whatever. And another of the guys, like I do events with now. So it came together full circle. But we're going to these events and I run into this dude named Isaiah and we really vibe together. And now the group is just growing and growing as we're going to these tech events. And he's like, oh, after this, you got to come to the penthouse. It's like, oh yeah, like let's go to the penthouse, whatever. And he's like, first you got to go to the tech salsa event. I'm like, all right, cool. So I go to the salsa event and I'm salsaing and he's not even there. So I'm there for like an hour just sweating, like, I don't know, he's not even there. So I was like, oh, I'm at the penthouse. I'm like, why didn't you just tell me to go to the penthouse? He's like, oh, it's on the way. Whatever, right? So I go to the penthouse. I'm like, how am I going to get in? I'm like, I'm just going to tell him I'm Isaiah. So I just tell him I'm Isaiah. They're like, right this way. So I get to this penthouse. So he just snuck me into this penthouse party, right at this tech event. And they're all like, you got to come on the yacht. I'm like, what yacht? It's the yacht party tomorrow. I'm like, what yacht party? Right? So the next day we go to this yacht party and I managed to sneak into this yacht party by telling them I bought a ticket. I just don't have my cash app on my phone. So they're like, oh, we'll just let you in. And that was the Tavern yacht party. And I didn't know any of these people. So I didn't know any of these people. I didn't know anything about anything, right? I'm just meeting people, coming to the city, whatever. And that guy, Isaiah, ended up being my best friend. And going to these events, trying to like meet people, build these connections. When Tech Week ended, I had nothing to do. And I tried this thing called 222, which is this app which you pay $30 to get set up on like a dinner with 6 other strangers. And afterwards, you guys made it over comedy club, whatever. This is very popular now, right? And I do it. I'm like, man, that was fun, but I can't do this every week. Like, I'm gonna run out of money. Like, right? Like, I'm like trying to budget, whatever. And at first, I thought about doing something in real estate tech because I come from a real estate family. But eventually, I just started thinking about like how I can make friends, how I can meet people. And I started designing something around that. First, it was a hardware. Like, oh, what if people could like tap your shirt and get your information, and the AI like sends follow-ups to each other? Like, you're gonna remember that guy who said, "Oh, tap my shirt," you know what I mean, rather than get my LinkedIn or whatever. And I realized the value wasn't in the hardware; it was in the software,
Right.
of how people end up meeting and getting hooked and addicted to being out in real life. The same way I was addicted to going to these networking events after Tech Week, and it's just slowly over time like grew into the concept of ArkSphere, the first in-person social media, getting people hooked to real life, this feed that, you know, gets you to stop scrolling. And I can go on forever about that whole year, what it took to get here. But I think that I answered your question. I don't really remember.
No, you brought us exactly to where I was going to bring us, but you brought us there, which is the best part about all of this, because my question was eventually going to be, tell us about Ark and what inspired you and your experience in the way that you had it. It accompanied Tech Week, and then you took that to the next level, and you had that emotion about feeling pretty much left out or not fully in touch and in tune with people. I heard you speak about this before, but tell us a little bit about what inspired you then to do the app that you have now, which is amazing.
So from my background working in like fashion, I had already like worked around people's mental health. You alluded to it earlier of me. I nearly lost my best friend to suicide when I was during COVID. So I was around 15 or so. And I wanted to she had gone back and forth to the mental hospital multiple times. I don't even remember the number. And I asked her at one point, like, you know, why do you keep going back if you're just going to go back again? Right? Like, what is it doing for you? And she had told me, you know, like, when I come home, it feels like there's no one waiting for me. Like, there's no community for me. There's no place for people like me. And that really struck something in me. So I started designing clothes and collections around like telling the stories of myself and kids like me that were going through COVID and dealing with depression. And, you know, I wanted to create a community of people like this. So I called the company Born of It. And I did it for many years. And I did this event at this mental health organization where the guy had told me that there was a patient of his who had come to one of our events, and they had met their best friend, and they've been so much more optimistic about life. And he had told me something about how every day it feels like we're trying to be sold something. But if you could make something like what you're doing, that's not a product, but helps people find their people in a world where everyone's trying to sell you product, I think that you'd really, for one, you'd be a billionaire. But I think that you'd really change the world. And I really sat with me. And when I'd come to New York and I went through this whole problem, I was like, wow, like, what if this is all just like coming full circle? So after Tech Week, I had noticed that all the restaurants were getting all this business. They flagged from after Tech Week. So they weren't having the same traffic of people. So I'd come to one of them. I was like, hey, if I could bring you, say, 100 customers on like a weekday, like a Tuesday or something, what would that mean for your business? And they're like, that would mean a lot for my business. It would mean whatever, right? So I'd ask, like, how do you currently do your marketing? They're like, oh, we spend a little bit on Meta. We have a social media person. So we just post things, hoping one will go viral. They'd spend money on ads. And that's the only way that like in-person businesses know what to do, but they don't really expect money to come out of it. But it's just the only thing they know how to do. So I told them, if I could do this event with you, let me bring out my audience, demo my idea of how we're going to try to connect people more in person. I barely knew what it was going to be. And cross-promote with me that we're going to be doing these together. So I did it. We brought a big crowd. I demoed the product. I made a pitch deck. I threw together. And that was the first event me and Stefan did, actually. Wow. It was supposed to be a comedy. It was a comedy show night for founders and investors. And we had comedians come out. We did a demo, whatever. And eventually I was just doing it like every week, like constantly, like with different people, different restaurants, different places. And I had grown like a wait list of people signing up to them to, you know, cross promoting with different hosts, whatever. And during that time, I had a developer who, I'm not going to say who they are, but they essentially left the business or had to leave the business. And I had to make a decision to either go home and stop because the time I would visit home for Christmas and just, do a normal life. I wasn't going to really see this through. So I made the tough call to let go of that developer and teach myself how to code. That I was going to come back. I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't have much. I was going to come back and I was going to somehow make this work. And I did that. And I started working on a side project. I was doing like a legal tech job. I started working on a side project around that. And my boy had told me, if you come bring me as your co-founder, it's my boy from Harvard, you can come and live with me on campus. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do, which you're not allowed to do. But I had come out there and I stayed there for maybe a couple of weeks, and I really needed that to like save up money a little bit, whatever. And I learned so much about software, going to their classes. I learned so much about like the way people thought, because when I was there, I felt so uncomfortable. Like everywhere I went, everyone was like, why do you have a tattoo on your neck? What year are you?
Yeah.
Whatever. Like everyone was always sizing me up.
Yeah.
Like I just felt so out of place. And I even told someone that like, I feel like being here, like I really don't belong here. And they had told me, well, it's because you don't. Like I resonated more with and felt more comfortable with the cafeteria workers and the people cleaning up the space than I did the other people my age there. And it made me think about, I wonder what, Mark Zuckerberg was thinking when he was here designing a social network to try to like get everyone to know what each other were up to or whatever. Did you have something else you wanted to stop me?
No, because this is exactly the place to go, because what I was going to say is there's part of you that broke through all of those barriers and those those preconceived notions. When someone meets someone, they're very judgmental, and they may make these off-the-cuff, spontaneous judgments about someone without getting to know them. Yet you still broke through all of that and didn't let that bring you down. Where did that come from? How did you do that? Where did you learn that, or how did you manage?
I felt like something that was different from me to everyone else on campus is majority of them had families that would support them, like that could really take care of them. And also like they had their degrees, their education, their network to fall back on. I didn't think I really had any of that. I was sleeping on a couch with a suitcase, and that was all I had to my name. So like I felt like no matter where I went, I still was dealing with this problem. So there's no one else in the world that could care about this more than me. It's the way that I guess I told myself. And if I'm not successful doing this, there's nothing else I'm more qualified to do. So I felt like I had no choice but to do this after a certain point. And anytime I try to do something else, like side jobs or whatever, or like it all would just lead me back to feeling more lonely and trying to find things that would make me feel less lonely, and right back to ArkSphere, right?
So
like I couldn't escape it, I guess.
That's exactly it. So you broke through all those preconceived notions people had. You didn't succumb to the emotions of bringing yourself down. You ignored that. Your resilience, what you've learned in your martial arts, pushed you through. You recognized, this is where I belong. As far as my drive is to connect and to connect people. So tell us about Ark now, and how this emotion and this thought and this concept all came together to where you are now with Ark.
Well, I really had to think about like the things that I wanted to see in the world that would have made me want to get out the house and meet people. And thinking about things like, sometimes I want to go to events, but I don't have anyone to go with, so I'm not going to go. Or sometimes I think something could be interesting, but if I don't see what it's like before I get there, I'm not going to take the chance and go an hour into the city or whatever, or pay for a ticket especially. So I thought about, how could I solve for those things? So I made scenes to where users can see a video of what the experience can be like before they arrive. And when you're joining, you're not just an attendee, you're joining a circle of people. Like you're joining a group. You're going to get notified about if someone accomplishes something, like someone's pregnant, if someone like just got a new job, you can chat with people before you go. Like you're joining a community whenever you join a scene off a park. And there was even a point where I had nowhere to live in New York, and I had to call a shelter to see if I had somewhere I could go. And I remember when I was on the phone, they were like, how can I help you, caller? I was like, well, I'm going to this and that. Okay, caller, how urgent are you in for housing? And I remember being so stressed already. And I got so upset. I told them my name is Jackson. I was just so annoyed them calling me caller. And they were like, that's understandable, but we are trained to not call or ask for the name of the young people who deposition us. And that really resonated with me. And I was like, when I build art, I don't want people to see companies and businesses that are having these events or whatever. I want them to see they're joining Nik, or they're joining Jackson,
Right.
or they're joining Isabella. And when you arrive, people know who you are. Like, that was what I really wanted to solve for. Like, people really being able to autonomously, no matter where they move in the world, what they do, where they're at in life, there's always a place for them. And that's an innate human problem that I think exists across any generation. So that was my mentality when building the platform, when teaching myself software, and like focusing on making it as seamless as possible for people to be able to do that. And by the time I eventually built the app and launched it, yes, we had a lot of people like signing up and using it. But I noticed that I didn't realize that what I was really building was a marketplace. Like, it was supply and demand. People were doing live experiences, people were joining live experiences. So I had a bunch of demand, and I had like 5 suppliers. I had thousands of people in like a few events, like people to join. And most of it was just me and my friends. So it was just me and my friends hanging out and like strangers coming out. But people would churn after like the first like few weeks because there wasn't anything for them to do. And I completely rethought about my business, and I realized that my flywheel is in people that are putting together these communities and live experiences and empowering them so that they can bring their people, and my people always have something to do. So when I reframed that and I had to bring on help, I brought on this guy who was a solution engineer over at Salesforce. And we're going to reimagine. This is what we're focused on, reimagining customer relations and marketing purely through live experiences. No more we have to like pay for a CRM, where you have to like create all these flyers, post across a bunch of social medias. And like, instead, why can't you just talk to Ark and say, Ark, I have this vision. I want to bring together founders and investors over at whatever place. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but can you help me? And Ark will be like, well, okay, who do you currently have? Who are you trying to reach? When are you trying to do it? It will create the event for you. It'll handle the posting for you. It'll look at whoever's in your database, and it'll look at every person as an individual. It won't say, come to Founder Investors Night. It'll look at your page and see you're Nik, because it can look on your LinkedIn. You do interviews. You're trying to meet with founders. You're trying to get people's stories told. It'll say, hey, Nik, there's 8 founders who haven't done any media up until this point. Would you like me to connect you with them so you can meet them at whatever place? And every person will have an individual outreach for them actually going to live experiences. So that's where like our mind completely shifted. Like, if we empower people putting live experiences to make it so much easier for them, they're going to convert their people more. And those people are eventually going to feel more empowered to create their own live experiences. And that's how we go from 35,000 people to 10 million, 100 million, a billion people. So that no matter where you go in the world, there's always a community you can join that could change your life when you're looking for somewhere to live, when you're looking for a new job, if you're looking for, a co-founder, if you're looking for whatever. Because those are all the things that kept me in New York when I had no way to stay. It was the people I would meet. So it's something that is so useful that it just solves your people problem. Does that answer your question?
It completely does. And to the fullest extent. And this is where this is where the work I do really comes alive. Somebody asked me recently, how do you know you had a good interview? When I get this great emotional, warm feeling, listening to someone describe exactly what they're passionate about, like you have just now, about the work you're doing and how your personal experience translated into a professional one. The emotions that you were experiencing, if I can put it this way, you saw a need to fill for yourself that was missing out there in the world, wanting to connect and belong, feeling alone or not connected. And yet you took it to the next level here. And now you're raising $1.5 million. What does that number represent to you beyond just the business math?
Well, I've committed to doing this. Like, I think that God gave me a mission that ever since I almost lost my friend, that I'm meant to be a bridge for people who are addicted to social media and they're trying to build a new life for themselves. They're trying to find their people. That is who I think I'm supposed to serve. I think that the last generation of social media was centered around trying to keep people entertained. And I think that my mission is trying to get people to really connect in a way that hasn't been done before. And I think that I'm going to be spending the next 20 years plus of my life doing that. So what the 1.5 million does is it just empowers us to do it faster and stronger. Because everything I described to you, like, I was almost late to this call because I was just mapping out like the things that I'm going to have to build to do this. And I'm going to have to call people and tell them, here's why you should be doing this to me. And I have no money or anything to give you. And whether or not they say yes, I'm still going to build it. And I'm a firm believer that if I'm still doing this after 15 years of living the way I'm currently living, I live in the exact same place, eat the exact same foods, and am solving the exact same problem. By the time that time has passed, whoever was even thinking about competing with me would have already sold their businesses or would have gave up. And I would have had 15 years worth of software and community to completely beat them out. The 1.5 million helps cut that 15 years to a year or to 6 months or to 4 months. So I can just go to the next level. We're already at like a third of 100,000 people. With the right gasoline on my fire, I can build everything I'm talking about in weeks rather than in a year or in 6 months or whatever. And I can be the first person to really build the first in-person social media in a market that no one really sees how large it is.
Impressive. Very impressive. What's it like for you now to be speaking with others who may be older than you, different background, and really working towards reaching your goal? How do you view yourself now, and how do you approach that?
Well, when it comes to, I think there's two angles with that, right? When it comes to talking to someone about, let's say, collaboration, like I'm talking to an engineer, I stopped trying to present it as this big opportunity. And I started telling them how this is what I'm working on. And this is why it's really hard. This is why it is like so hard to do, because we have to do this. We have to do that.
Right.
Then we have to do this. And it's hard for someone to create this because of this and that. And you have to retrain hosts. I'm thinking about flyers. I'm thinking about creating videos. You have to think of like content creators. And you have to build an AI that learns them and understands them more than anyone else like in the space. You have to get them to understand it from an email to pull from their LinkedIn, from, pull from the things they like to search, or things from whatever that is all public information, and then get it to understand you the more that you talk to it. And then you have to also go to users and say, this is the best way to discover people. And like, I started telling them how hard it was so I can weed out all the people who aren't even going to try.
Well done.
Because the way I believe is that I actually learned from the guy, what's his name? He started like this fast food chain. It's like a chicken chain, Cane's. He said that people kept asking him about how he handled franchising. And he said, I stopped trying to present the opportunity and I started telling people how hard it was to make money. And it almost, the right person took that as a challenge. And they're like, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking to be a millionaire and I'm willing to do this. He started targeting speaking as though he knew that person would be like, well, how hard could it really be? Right? So that's where I've shifted because I'm already like that. I have to start talking to people about, this is one of the hardest problems in the world to solve for. So you have to be someone that wants to be remembered for solving one of the hardest problems humanity is dealing with, which is connection, loneliness, anywhere in the world. So the people that I onboard are going to be people that are so excited for that problem. And the challenge with that is that a lot of the people most qualified to do it are getting paid $250,000 a year, or 30-something years old. They have relationships, they have families, they want to go to the gym, they have all these things. And there's no logical way for me to tell them that is all beautiful. You have to love this more, honestly. You have to love it so much it consumes you. Like, that's what it's going to take for me to get to the position that I need to get. Either people that see that and they believe that so much that solving for loneliness will be their legacy. Like, that's the way that I've learned to start speaking to people. And I've been attracting higher talent and quality people ever since that onto my team. And I also have accepted that people are going to come and go. And that's okay. But the one thing that's consistent is I'm still here, and the product and the community is always going to be growing as long as I have that urgency.
It certainly comes true. I just love the way you put it all together. You're really nailing all the points that I wanted to cover, and your enthusiasm and your passion, your excitement really comes through, and it's so impressive. I
appreciate that.
Has your age ever worked in your favor? A moment where being young actually gave you the advantage?
Yes, and I don't know. Because I remember when I first started my fashion company, I was standing outside 3 days a week, 12 hours a day to sell clothes. And I had to figure out how I was going to sell these t-shirts with my logo. So one other one. So instead of telling people that, oh, you should buy my t-shirt, it's great quality, whatever, I would say, you should check out my brand. I'm a 17-year-old fashion designer. Walking down the street, so they'd be like, They look behind me and I say, my name is Jackson Greene. I'm a 17-year-old fashion designer. I make clothes to empower young people with their mental health. It's for people that are different, for people that don't feel supported by their own communities, people who don't have an environment to support them. That's why I call it Born Other. And that's what I would sell them. I'd sell them on there's a lot of young people who battle this every day, and I'm an advocate for that. So they would be buying into that movement. They weren't buying the shirts, right? So, some of me doing that is what helped afford me to take that risk to come in here. I don't know if that's saying forward, but it helped me have some money to actually take that risk. And even now, like when I talk to people, they definitely look at me different because of my age. Because most people are scared and they want to look towards a leader, and to look to someone half their age, like, makes them very nervous and anxious, right? But in some cases, I think even talking to people and say, hey, like, I want some advice, or I want to learn something, or can you give me some feedback on this? I don't know if they would have done the same thing if I was 30 or whatever, or 40. So I really don't know how much it's helped me outside of like what I spoke on, but there are definitely moments that I can think of that my ability to tell my story about who I am, I think, is what really afforded me. Maybe when I'm older, I can tell you like the difference it is. But I think even if I was like 30 or 40 something years old, like, it would just be something else that would give me my edge, whether it's my experience to why they want to talk to me, or it's because like I remind them of maybe they didn't have like an older figure in their life that actually wants to sit down with them and talk to them. So I think I just would have found something else to leverage.
Right. Because I want to compliment you as a young person coming from a place where you had a lot of adversity and a lot of struggles, and you have a lot of empathy. You care significantly for those who are experiencing a level of depression or loneliness or even anxiety or some fears or some worries. You've broken through some of those issues that you might have experienced. And without even going into detail, it just, the way you described everything really helps paint a picture of where you've come from. And you've endured all that. And the training you've had, it seems, in your MMA training really has had an impact on you. And of course, where you grew up. And, many people might not have taken that leap to leave the comfort of home. Even if it was as uncomfortable as it is, many people stay. And many young people, as you know, I've been doing a focus on Gen Z and the struggles that they're having to launch, to find work, to get into college, to find a career. They tackle a lot of the issues and stereotypes. So I was going to ask you if you had a moment to think about, if you can take a look at, I was going to pull something up. Maybe you can tell us whether or not you believe some of these perceptions are true of Gen Z, because really many, Gen Z are likely to hold back and not be proactive, may not, take the next step. There's a lot of stereotypes. I'm wondering if you notice any of these and if these ring true. Or can't handle feedback, no professional communication, phone dependent, needs constant validation, job hops under pressure, too easily offended, brings parents to interviews, tech savvy, people incompetent, only works for causes they believe in, the big one, which is lazy, doesn't want to pay their dues, work-life balance obsessed, entitled too early, lacks resilience, overdependence on validation. I'll leave it up.
Honestly, like, I feel like I see this with most people I talk to. So I think that, like, yes, this is definitely something that, like, traits that exist in my generation.
Right.
But I honestly see them just as often with,
right.
I might see them more with adults. I mean, not bringing parents to interviews. I've never seen someone do that. But I think most of these things are just all related in fear. Like, even the only wanting to work for causes you believe in, like, right. A lot of that is just rooted in wanting to feel, like, safe in your identity. And I know a lot of people that are in their 30s that only want to work for companies but they don't have to worry are going to get shut out of business, because then they could say, like, oh, I work for JP Morgan, I work for whatever, I work for this. Like, I honestly think these are just innate human traits, and it's just within our nature to compare different age groups or whatever people. I don't necessarily think it's a my generation thing. I do think my generation has a lot more anxiety than previous generations around, like, their future and around their career options. But most of people my age, I think they actually want to have jobs and they want to work and they want to get their lives better. And they have a hard time, especially within New York City, like, finding positions that will take them, since it is such a competitive market. And even inside software, like, it's a lot harder to get a position with, like, the different, like, AI, vibe coding tools. Coming like an entry-level engineer is very rare now. Even my friend over at Harvard, he's like, I'm looking for a job. I was like, you can't get a job? Couldn't even get an internship. I was very, very shocked by that. Like, I think that it's less so like them being competent. I think it's more so everyone is just afraid to put faith in other people. So if I have to put faith inside a 21-year-old, you can imagine like how that just makes things even harder. I don't think it's necessarily a my generation or your generational thing. I think people are just so scared in this AI era, to be honest.
No, well said. I'm curious about anything further you can mention about the impact of AI now that on the perception that young people have, because you hear when professors and keynote speakers mention AI, you get a roar of boos. There's a level of fear over it. There's a level of embracing it to use it for yourself, but then there's the fear of displacing entry-level workers. Anything further you notice about AI and Gen Z and the impact it's had?
Well, I definitely see there's a big like dependence on people talking to their agents around like the decisions they need to make. Like I remember I had a friend of mine and he would talk to ChatGPT like it was his friend. He used to joke that ChatGPT is his real girlfriend, and he had a girlfriend. He used to joke that ChatGPT is the father that he never had. And we used to laugh at him for that, because sometimes we would get into fights and arguments and he'd come back and he'd be like, all right, so I talked to Chat. And I think that it almost feeds to a degree in like when you have so much access to information, you have so much more anxiety about making the wrong decision, right? So I think that that is a way that has affected young people inside within the negative light, but in the positive light, it's empowered people that come from non-traditional backgrounds like myself to learn software, to learn about technology, to learn about venture capital, learn about investment, to be able to know how to present ourselves inside professional environments, to talk through problems that we can't through therapy or through family or friends. Or like, I think that within the short term, it has more benefits than it does not. In the long term, I think it's up to other generations. It's up to other generations to see like how they're going to use or enable AI to be able to like live really. But within like over the next 5 to 10 years, even 20 years, I think that artificial intelligence is going to be a big way in how people allow themselves to make money and find opportunity. And I do think that it enables you to have to be more intelligent about how you produce money, right? So for example, right, an entry-level job of me being a front-end engineer would be a lot harder to get now with AI. Right. However, if I decide that I'm going to build software to help moving companies, for example, get more referrals through real estate agents, and those agents are going to get a percent of whatever it closes from those said referrals by making a social network for real estate agents and vendors to connect. Like the same amount of time I would have spent at that job, I put into that product, and the return I'd get from doing a good job isn't remotely close to the return I'd get doing a good job at that job. So I think that with the more access technology, it's going to enable people to have more opportunity if they're willing to rise to the challenge. So I don't know if it's great for everyone, but for the people that are willing to go out and really kill, they're going to be enabled in ways that they weren't in previous generations.
I just love the way you put it, just directly to the point. And it's inspiring because there's a lot of people who are discouraged and succumbing to the AI fear. And that's what I end up seeing, the anxiety, the overreaction, the cognitive distortions that they might have about how gloom and doom is coming, and the fear of stepping forward and leaping to the next level and taking a chance and taking a risk, which is what you've done. Jackson, before we wrap up, I just want to compliment you and the work that you've done, and thank you for coming on the show and being this open. What you've built with Ark isn't just a business story. It's what happens when someone takes real adversity, a leap with no safety net, and turns it into something other people now use to feel less alone before they even walk in the door. That's not strategy, that's lived experience made useful for other people. And I'm genuinely impressed with what you've built, and even more with who you've had to become to build it, because that's the real story. The awareness that you've developed and the experiences you've had, the challenges that you've just broken through and didn't let things stop you. As a young person, as someone who's didn't have the amount of experience, but the drive is what I want to emphasize, which is so impressive. And I know your story is going to be and is really an inspirational one, but it's going to be, I'm sure, really inspiring for many listeners.
So I want to shout out my mother and my sister. So I definitely wouldn't be there without them. But in particular, my mom. I did MA, but I really got my work ethic, my return to my mother. She was a single mother. She raised the two of us, and she worked like a dog. I remember when I was a kid, she would drive Uber, she would do DoorDash, she would do Instacart, she would do Amazon, she would sell real estate, she'd work like home, like customer service jobs. And I remember she got so sick one time, she had to go to the hospital overworking. And when I was a kid, she used to drive around these wealthy people neighborhoods, and she would say like, this is going to be your house one day, and you're going to buy me a Porsche, and you're going to do this, you're going to do that.
Oh, nice.
And she used to work for people like Steve Harvey and like other celebrities, like doing whatever work at jobs that she got paid less to do. But she would tell me she took those jobs over other jobs because she wanted to learn from them how to run a business so she could teach it to me. So she would tell me this at like 3 years old, 4 years old, 2 years old, whatever. And I think that that's where I really like, ever since I was a little boy, like I'd always been drawing. I've always been working all-nighters. Like I always felt like I was like, this is who I was supposed to be. So I have to acknowledge her for that. And even my sister, like when I came to New York, there was a point I had like nowhere to stay. And even though like we had at the time going back and forth our relationship, her like allowing me to stay on her couch for the time she did, like that really saved me. And a big part of my journey, what pushes me, like, yes, I love to save the world. Yes, I love all these things. But like when I'm up at 4, 5 in the morning trying to fix this bug or like ship this feature in 2 weeks, and my AI is telling me it's going to take me 4 months, it's not because I'm thinking about saving the world. It's because I don't want to be a loser. And I've gone so far and invested so much to where there's no world where this doesn't work. It's just I already made my mind. So for anyone out there that may feel like they need this big motivation or this big calling in order for them to build a life that they want, you just have to want it so badly that you're willing to sacrifice everything. And that's the way that I live my life. But I wouldn't have been able to do it the level I am if I didn't learn all that from my mother, who now I have a really good relationship with, and if my sister didn't take that leap in allowing me to enter her couch.
I'm so glad you included them in the closing remarks. It certainly shows it's been in you and a part of you, and you're living and you're continuing to do the work that your mother was inspiring you to do, and you found your path, which is the most difficult thing for many young people to find, which for me, it's really gratifying to hear stories like yours. And I knew when I had first met you that you had a real strong story that you would really be inspiring for others to hear. So I want to thank you again for speaking. And I'm looking forward to at some point down the road, when other things come up, I will be contacting you, and I look forward to including you in other things that I'm looking towards doing. And I will certainly be inviting you.
Yes, let's do this again when I'm much more successful.
Yeah. Well, it might
that
be
was the only thing that made me hesitant to do the interview. I was like, man, like let me get rich before I start doing interviews. Like that's like.
And I know it will be, and maybe it'll be only in a short time. It could be even shorter time than you imagined. So think about that. Think about how quickly you've reached this point in such a short time. And, I've been doing the work I've been doing as a clinician for over 30 years, and I'll continue to do this, which is another aspect of the work, which is, listening to people. And now I enjoy this part of the work, which is presenting it to the world. So this fulfills a part of what my mission is nowadays. So this is wonderful to have you be a part of Pivot Point and to share your story. And I thank you again.
Well, I appreciate it. I had a great time.
Great. And I look forward to speaking to you soon. I'm going to close here. Let me just end with the one question I like to ask everyone at the end of every episode. Think about it. What's your pivot point? What's your pivot point?